The Healthcare Security Cast is sponsored by 3D Network Technology. Reliability is our core value. Visit www.3dnetworktechnology.com. And by Genetec, delivering security strategies for healthcare. Visit Genetec, that's GENETEC.com. And by the Change Execution Group. Visit 360lifetransformations.com.
Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast, the podcast dedicated to healthcare security, safety, and emergency management. If you are involved with a healthcare security program or desire to be, this podcast is for you. Join the conversation as we discuss the issues that matter to healthcare security professionals while leveraging the expertise of healthcare security thought leaders and experts in personal development. And now, here's your host, Brian Hamilton.
Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast for Monday, August the 3rd. On today's show, I'm joined by Sarah McVanel, who's a returning guest. She's you'll know her as the Frog Lady. She's her area of expertise is in recognition. So, Sarah, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll kind of jump in from there.
Yeah, for the folks who didn't catch the last recording, they may wonder, Frog Lady, what does that have to do with security or healthcare? I'm pretty sure we don't want frogs in hospitals. So FROG stands for Forever Recognize Others Greatness, and spent most of my career in healthcare and actually realized that a lot of the teams who were struggling either with sick time, retention, injuries, there was almost always an undercurrent of incivility, of disconnection, lack of teamwork. And when we would go in and we would help people recognize each other, and frankly, if it's been toxic for a while, it might have also been helping people actually see their own greatness again. We realized that we could have a huge impact and help the team turn around really quickly. So that's where Frog came to be, actually, out of some work in hospitals with a group. We worked with them for 2 years. 2 years. That's some staying power, seriously. And we said at the end, hey, healthcare loves acronyms. What's an acronym we can come up with to remember this hard work that we've all gone through in the journey? And somebody just said Frog, Forever Recognize Others Greatness, and it stuck. So that's why I'm the Frog Lady, and why recognition, I know, is the single easiest, most cost-effective strategy that we could be using in organizations, including resource-constrained healthcare, to empower people, support people, and help them through some pretty tough times, such as what we're going through now.
Right, and you had mentioned obviously your background in healthcare. You know how we do love acronyms, and on top of your previous writing, you actually have a book that's I guess it's actually in publication right now.
Yeah.
You know, there we go. You're holding up the Rockstar book.
Yeah.
So
Rockstar, yeah, this is actually I did not plan on writing another book this year. This is my 5th book in 5.5 years, and it's quite quite a lot of work to produce a book. But when COVID hit, and I was watching all of my healthcare clients just scramble to try to provide amazing care, to be able to get staff and physicians and all the auxiliary supports in place to assuage people's concerns and fears and worries when they don't have the right to refuse work. It was incredibly taxing. And just the number of messages that I received from people across all different spectrums of the hospital system, and of course community sector as well, I just thought I need to do something. So that's actually in one day, which is, of course, I don't know about you, but this is where I have all my brilliant moments. I need to start buying shower markers so that I can remember them. But this particular day I remember it. I thought, really it comes down to that people need to remember that their staff are the rocks that are going to get them through this. And if the staff feel like I am the rock to this organization, then probably they can hold the faith through some pretty challenging times. And we started to see people responsive, like in Spain, people hanging outside of their balconies at 8:30 at night, clanging their cups. Do you remember seeing that footage, Ryan? It was pretty amazing, wasn't it?
yeah, absolutely.
So they were reminding their healthcare people that you are the rocks that are getting us through this time. So I thought, well, if that's kind of, an expression that we use, is there a way of turning that into an acronym? To your point, healthcare loves acronyms. So, how can we really just rock that acronym? No pun intended. And that's where I came up with Rockstar. So because really what I was seeing is the most strain was when people, if they didn't feel recognized, if there was a lack of organization, lack of communication, and a lack of kindness, they were falling apart already. And we were just at the beginning of COVID. So I thought, what if we reverse that? And we didn't look at it from a problem-based lens, but we looked at it from a solution-based lens. What if, in fact, people were able to really, leaders and peers were able to say, how can we double down on recognition? How can anytime something's not working, we work to organize a system or a process or a checklist or some system better? If we communicate better, more consistently, and we shift how we're communicating, like abandon those hour-long team meetings, move to huddles or move to 15-minute or 5-second check-ins or whatever needs to happen, how can we communicate better? And how can we do everything with kindness? Just like those people clanging their cups and the signs on people's lawns, and how could we do that? And then we get star results. We get people who are more satisfied. There's more teamwork and collaboration. People feel a greater sense of achievement, because we all know when you leave your shift at the end of the day in healthcare, or leaders who are listening to this, when you leave your inbox with things unanswered, we don't feel that sense of achievement. So how can we feel that sense of meaning and achievement right now? And then finally, R is retention, which is always a struggle in healthcare because we don't have enough talent to fill all of the positions. And you and I, before we turn the podcast record button on, you were talking about how you've had people step up and how amazing they've been in your business. And at times it has been challenging to find enough people to fill the spots. And that's a reality. It's always a reality, but particularly in times of change. So that's the genesis of Rockstar, and people responding to it. And I'm super grateful, because it's a way of being able to, it was my way of being able to help right now, at a time when I wasn't sure at the beginning of COVID. What could I possibly do to help? This was my contribution.
All right. Yeah. And there's been a number of things that have come, I guess, positive and unexpectedly out of COVID. So obviously, we dusted off your book writing abilities a little bit earlier than you'd planned. So that's obviously a great thing. Now, I guess, so just to summarize, when you're looking at the ROC part of the acronym, these are the characteristics that that are going to be indicative of an effective leader.
Yeah.
And then the star is the results, the desired outcomes that will be achieved if you follow the ROC framework. Is that a good way to summarize
Got it. You're a quick study, Brian. I love it. Yes. If when you have ROC leadership behaviors, recognize, organize, communicate with kindness, then you get star outcomes. You get satisfaction, teamwork, achievement, and retention. And who doesn't want A, to be that kind of leader, and B, to get those kind of outcomes? So really what this resource is designed to do is to give people a few ideas about how to do more of that, even in times of change, even when we're going through a crisis, because now's not the time to create business intelligence tools and revamp our scheduling system. And that's not for crisis times. And similarly, even if people are picking up this resource or they're thinking about ROC leadership behaviors, the next massive change that comes along when we're on the other side of COVID, it's still, we need to streamline our energy and our effort. There's only so much cognitive and emotional bandwidth, and only so many fiscal and human resources that are available to go around, particularly in healthcare. So I would suggest that in my 20 plus year career in organizational development, the people that have been most successful and most satisfied in their leadership career over time have been people who have always believed that their staff were their rocks, and therefore they have always recognized, sought to organize, communicate as much as possible, and been kind. I don't know, do you have an exception to that, Brian? Do you feel like some of the people who have been the most successful healthcare leaders have had different, or they've had the opposite of that?
Well, not the ones not the ones who maintain a good connection with people. I'll put
Yeah.
it I'll put it that way. You can definitely get to a certain level of an organization without having some of those,
Mhm.
I guess we'll say soft skills, even though that's maybe not the right term to use for that now, or emotional intelligence. But there's people who can get high in an organization, but they may be able to do it without building those connections and having people view them a certain way.
Such a great point because a lot of us can ride the position power wave, and it at some point it only gets you so far. And you mentioned emotional intelligence, which I think is so powerful in this conversation too, because your IQ, we know from research, gets you, it factors into about 1/3 of the success of your career by the time you get to leadership. And after that, you need to relate to people well, have good agility and adaptability and flexibility. You've got to have good stress management, ability to relate to people, adjust your view to adapt to the situation, have optimism in the face of roadblocks. These are some of the things that the most, I'm guessing in your career too, these are the most successful people that I always wanted to be like when I quote grew up. I want to be like that person. And I still remember them, even though I don't work for them and work in that industry anymore, as in terms of working for an employer. I work for myself now. They're still my role models because they were so effective in their role, and I will always strive to continue to be them, or the best version, to make them proud, to emulate what worked for them. And your point around connections is so, that's probably why I still think about them, because I felt a sense of connection to them. I trusted them, I believed in their vision, and even when I didn't have all the evidence that it was going to work out, I believed in them. And that's really what people need from the folks listening to this podcast. They need to be able to believe in their leaders, not just, we're going to make it through this, like platitudes. We're beyond that point. Positive mantras and motivational posters and quotes will only get us so far. If we're in the middle of different waves, who knows how many waves, now is the time that we could be really sitting back and looking at, how much do I recognize? And go back and listen to that podcast that you and I recorded, if it's like, what are the ways we can recognize in healthcare security? So how much can we shift the way we do our work, streamline it a bit more, maybe make some tough choices about cutting out some things that aren't essential right now? How can we communicate better, or keep the communication, that extra communication we were doing at the peak of COVID? What do people still need? Let's not let that wane just because we're not in as extreme a crisis mode. How can we keep that going? And everything that we do, even when people are negative, frustrated, stressed, how can we still practice kindness? Because they are doing the best they can. I mean, what do you think are some of the things that people are going through in their personal lives outside of work that you've heard about, or that you've experienced in your career, that we can guess as leaders, if we're not kind, it's your struggle? Like, what do you think are some of the things security staff are going through?
Generally, well, it really depends on the context. So a lot of my staff are performing access control duties, or supporting screeners when they're experiencing challenges. So the challenges that you're seeing there are either individuals who are trying to enter the facility and maybe skip the screening process, or staff who are just kind of frustrated that they have to go through a screening process. So really just being able to kind of engage and either prevent those situations from escalating, or responding if they have escalated. So that's been a large part of what they're dealing with. And it really depends as well, like when you're looking at some of the other parts of the program where these folks are responding to, say, a violent patient, for example, and that patient has COVID-19. It changes the way that they have to go into the situation. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting things at play for the security professionals,
Mhm.
dealing with the current climate.
And empathy is a huge resource that we can draw upon. If somebody is behaving a bit out of control at the door, and they're getting frustrated, they have to do screening, it's much easier to go to this empathetic place and say, wow, they must be so worried about what they're going to confront on the unit. that they're already so keyed up. Or that patient who's out of control and has COVID. It's like, wow, imagine the worry they must feel about their health, and how emotionally fragile they must feel that their loved ones can't come and visit them. It's isolating and exhausting and stressful being in a hospital anytime, let alone not being able to have visitors. I remember having a baby during SARS. Now, on the one side, it was great because I didn't have an entire troop of people constantly, storming our door to look at the baby and, pay attention to me, which of course they should have been paying attention to me. But, in all seriousness, though, it was as much as it was benefit that it was quiet, it was also lonely. I was used to being around people all the time. We had this huge life event happen, and it was almost anticlimactic. So imagine then, and that was a positive situation in the middle of a health crisis.
Right.
Imagine what it must be like for people who are worried about their long-term health or even their life, and not even be able to have a visitor. So security, my professionals, hear me when I say your ability to just first come from a place of empathy and curiosity and go like, wow, it's really surprising that somebody who's like in the caring profession, or wow, that's really surprising that somebody who's been receiving such great care is this stressed and overwrought. Wow, I wonder what they must be going through. And that's the K, that's the kindness part. And that's all you have to do is just, that de-escalates it for yourself, which, as you and I both know, Brian, that's half the battle in de-escalating, is we have to de-escalate ourselves for us to be able to de-escalate a situation for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be in the right frame of mind for those situations to be able to react appropriately.
Yeah.
Now, I want to circle back to the book for a minute. Now, I guess given what we're discussing and just the busy nature of healthcare, especially right now,
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that's great about the book is just the size of it. There's a lot of really digestible information. The way it's structured, it looks like, it's probably going to take a couple hours to go through, or if you wanted to break it down into a few minutes a day, you can still get through it in a fairly quick time. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, like how you've structured it and, what we can expect for the book moving forward? I think
Yeah.
there was some discussion that you're going to be making this into an audio format as well.
Yeah, and really great noticing. That's awesome that you noticed that this is really small, because that was very intentional. You're right. I mean, healthcare folks are busy all the time, particularly right now. So I wanted it to be something that would be a manageable resource for people. It wasn't going to take an entire weekend to read, or it would sit on one's side table, be one of many stacks of books, and then just look at it and feel guilty they couldn't read it. So there's 8 mini chapters, and it's 15,000 words, which is about probably maybe 1/4 of the size of a normal book. And it's organized by rock, and then all stars at the end. But then there's also a section in the middle about what are the things that get in the way of us being able to be rock star leaders, and to acknowledge and empathize with people in the situation that they're in all the time, particularly now. As well as talking about how we often think that when we're on the other side, when we're either in the valley of crisis, such as right now, when we're recording this, the first wave is quote unquote over. So things should be back to normal. People should be better. They must be able to take a breath. And yet we often are surprised that things are not better and it's not over. And folks are not super resilient. This is usually where we see the burnout and the incivility that's happened lurk its head, and the frustrations and the complaining. So each section of the book is short and specifically geared at healthcare leaders in particular, but really anyone who's trying to be a leader, small L leader in healthcare, can relate to. So I just sent it to somebody. I'm going to be on a podcast later this week, and she read it in 2 hours. So it's designed purposely to be short and very practical. Here's the context, and then what I do is I send people to a landing page, Greatness Magnified / Healthcare Leader, which it has the footnotes and it has the emotional intelligence research if people want to see that, as opposed to me putting it in the book and reading a whole section on that. We say this is grounded in research, and if you want to see it, you can go to that source. There's 55 resources, or sorry, 55 references that we used in the creation, I used in the creation of this book, from scientific studies and neuroscience and popular books. And all of that is not in the actual book. Those are not there. They're sitting on that landing page so that it doesn't take up any space and so it's light as well. People can take it with them if they're, let's say, once we're actually able to commute again. So if you're in Toronto, GTA, or in Chicago, and you normally take the train to work, it's light enough that you could pop it in your folio and bring it back and forth, and two commutes later, you're done. And that's also why we put it in audiobook format as well, as we realize that as people are driving to and from work, that's often the only time they have to consume content. And that's available as well. So it's really designed to be short and practical and yet evidence-based. The holy grail of healthcare, right? It has to be evidence-based and best practice. With it being specifically for healthcare people, and what is very unique about our industry. It's the most complex organization to run a hospital. So we need to acknowledge that and recognize that being a leader of any role, particularly though security, you have a very, very challenging role in a hospital. You're there expected to be everybody's savior, and yet don't have always a lot of say in how the organization's run, who gets hired, who's running the place, and that's a reality. And so if that's the reality, how can we support and help people?
Excellent. Now, looking at the Rockstar framework, just looking at the rock part and focusing specifically on the recognized portion,
Mm.
I know you had run a poll on LinkedIn about a month ago, just asking people how they prefer to be recognized. And, much to some people's surprise, the number one thing was just simply saying a thank you. And I believe the other options were there was a thank you note, a gift card, and
Mhm.
I think an award. I may be wrong on that last one, but yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And thank you for mentioning. I actually forgot to pop that poll up there, because you're right. One of the things that happened a month ago, everything's happening so fast. We forget what we did yesterday, let alone a month ago. But you're right. I put it out there because in the first book that we wrote, Forever Recognize Others' Greatness, which is the entire book is about recognition, and all the examples are in there is from our healthcare days. We realized when we went to a Canadian engagement survey company, Metrics at Work, and we asked them to analyze their huge database of engagement surveys, 250,000 engagement survey data points. What are the ways people most want to be appreciated? Number one was a verbal thank you. Just simply tell me thank you. 95% of people said that. Number two, 92% of people said make it specific and personalized. Any form, just make sure it's to me, not just generic. And then number three was a written thank you card specifically, 88% of people. And that is pretty much how things fell out in our LinkedIn poll as well. And that is every time I do a recognition keynote and I ask the audience, whether it's 50 people in the audience or 1,000 people, that is almost always the number one thing that people say is just tell me thank you. It's across industries, it's across cultures. So we underestimate the power of a simple thank you. It costs nothing. It takes seconds. All it requires is us leaders to pay attention. And what's really powerful about your industry is that you are very visible leaders. You're constantly walking around the hospital. You're seeing what's going on. So every time you thank whether it's somebody on your team or a peer or a busy frontline professional or an auxiliary staff, such as that housekeeper who's polishing that sink and wiping down every door handle, because that's how we keep our hospital from not having an outbreak, is the extra care and attention that they give all the time, particularly during COVID. Every time you say thank you, it costs us nothing. It takes virtually no time. And it also makes us feel good, because the response back, the visual and the auditory feedback that people give us back, it actually creates a positive chemical reaction in our brain too. So that word you used earlier with connection, that's a great example. You want the easiest, simplest, fastest way to build a connection with somebody. look them in the eye if it's culturally appropriate. So, obviously if you have a very culturally diverse workplace, you'll want to understand if looking somebody in the eye is appropriate or not. But for most of your listeners are in North America, looking people in the eye is a sign of respect. And so you look somebody in the eye and you say, thank you. And then if you tame it with, thank you for taking the extra time to wipe down every surface. I see you've taken a few extra minutes out of your day. You're helping to stop the spread of COVID. You're in line behind 30 and you realize that they probably work through their break. You say, hey, I'm taking a guess that you probably work through your break and you're just dying for that caffeine. Thank you so much for everything you do for this hospital. You may not even know this person, but you can hypothesize what they are doing and how they're supporting the organization. And if you want people to remember you, surprise them with an unexpected, unrequired thank you. And they will now be also positive for the health for your security people that show up, because they're positive about the leader that oversees them. They are considered to be good contributors by association with you.
Excellent. Now, actually, just remind me of something that I used to do at a hospital that I worked at with, the one set of staff that I did have. I would make sure I wrote them a thank you card on their birthday. And it wasn't just like a thank you card. I actually wrote a personalized message. So there's a couple of things there that get encompassed in that. Part of the challenge is you actually have to know everybody. You have to communicate with them and know enough to write something specific. Otherwise, it's just a card. And one really positive experience I had from that was, I came in one day after hours to do a test with one of my staff members who was working the night shift. And when we were having the conversation, he mentioned to me that, he really appreciated getting the card. He thought at first it was just going to be like a generic card, but, there was a personalized message. And I think the thing that he said that stood out for him as well as, being someone of color, we were the same in that way. And he just appreciated having a leader who is being able to recognize somebody of color as a leader in his field. So he really appreciated that. And one of the unintended consequences actually that I experienced was, people came to expect these cards. So there was a much lesser rate of people not showing up to work on their birthday, which, is known to be a thing. So just doing a little bit of something that was positive ended up yielding another set of results.
Yeah, I love that. And if for anyone who wants a hack to be able to do that, just what you did, and I love that you did that. See, I knew we're brother and sister from another mister. I love that. We're so of the same mind. So good. I use an app called Send Out Cards. You can, and we can put the link in the show notes. And there's a couple different plans. One is like pay as you go. Another one is one card a day. And I have the unlimited because I don't want, if I'm on a roll with recognition, I want to just go. But here's where it's really powerful with the anniversaries, because a lot of us in workplaces celebrate anniversaries, same with birthdays, is that you just have to enter their information once. And you can have the address be the same, the hospital. It can come to the hospital and go straight to that person. You put their name on it, that's the address. So it's super fast to populate this in your address book. And then you could have somebody working in your team, if you have an admin assistant or a student working for you or somebody on accommodation, have them put in everybody's birthdays, which you can get in your HRIS system, your human resources information system, and also the work anniversary. And if you get in and it alerts you weeks beforehand. So if you don't have time to do it right away, you've got a few weeks lead time there. It sends it within a few days. And that is a surprise. What's different, and all these beautiful cards are designed, professionally designed. It doesn't look like corporate speak because you can pick the card and it takes very little time. You can just search up a word. Like if somebody loves, let's say, I don't know, they love beavers, let's say. I'm Canadian, so I'm out of beavers. So you can Google the word beaver, and there's probably a card with a picture of a beaver on it. And it hopefully, it's like fits the birthday if you're trying to do a birthday card. And if not, you're like, okay, well, I'll use that for I don't know, whatever other reason people might have a birthday. Or you could just use one of the preset anniversary cards, birthday cards, celebration cards. And when you could, there's other milestones, like you finish the end of a big project or COVID, like we got through together. One of the cards on send out cards is not every hero wears a cape. So, and it's just got a picture of a mask. You could send that card to every one of your staff with just one sentence of what you've noticed about how they've shown up. And it could be, thank you for taking every extra shift I've given you. Somebody else could be, thank you for always having a smile, even when people were ornery at the front door. This takes virtually no time. In the first week of COVID, I sent out 150 thank you cards using this send out cards app. It took me one day to send 150 cards. And although it took an entire day, the ripple effect of positivity that people experienced from that was worth a week of my time. So having that system set up, and I mean, by all means, there's lots of other systems. You could have a spreadsheet, you could have your, I know CEOs and directors who have their admin assistant hand them a card and then they fill it out. So there's lots of ways to make this an efficiency hack. But sometimes one of the barriers that people have to doing exactly what you're doing and therefore not getting the results that you're getting, the satisfaction, added teamwork, sense of achievement and retention that happens for things like that, right? You got star outcomes, didn't you? Is that you can build in ways of it being more efficient. So if you're like, I don't have time for that, the question is, out of rock, how can I organize this so that I can make it happen? That's an organization hack.
Right, and it's funny because I was seeing a natural segue going towards the organized part of the acronym. So I guess you're focusing on recognition and how you're structuring that. Do you have any tips that you can share on how we could, you shared a couple there, but just any ideas on how we can keep ourselves organized with recognizing our employees?
Yeah, I love that question. Another tip that you can have or that you can practice is you can download the recognition checklist. You can go to greatnessmagnified.com/cool stuff. And there's a recognition checklist. By far and away, that is the number one thing people want. And you give that to people. It is a one sheet piece of paper. And what it does is it put, there's actually right at the top, it says name, birth date, and when you join, what day you join the organization. So there you go. You don't have to go into the HRIS system. Just give people the sheet of paper. And then it talks about the top ways people want to be recognized. So what you mentioned before around gift cards, awards, some people are into that, particularly if somebody has been in a long service organization, such as a hospital, and they've been there a long time. They may actually value those things because that's been part of the culture of the organization, most hospitals. So you ask them, of all of these ways I could recognize you, what do you want? On a scale of 1 to 5, what's most important to you? And you'll notice a range. And that allows you to treat people the way they want to be treated, the platinum rule versus the golden rule, treat people the way I want to be treated, because most people recognize the way they want to be recognized. And it may not be words of affirmation. There's a reason why that is not 100% of people. Some people do want the gift card, like show me the money, not just Jerry Maguire, right? But then at the bottom, it asks, what's your favorite restaurant? What do you take in your coffee, tea? So let's say somebody says, no, I want gifts. Don't tell me if I'm doing well. Don't tell me thank you. I just want a gift. And that's the only thing they want. But you know that they take their coffee black, but with one sweetener. So when you're getting your coffee, also get a coffee for them and bring it to them and say, thank you so much for picking up the shift today. I'm so grateful. Here's the coffee. I'm pretty sure this is exactly how you take it. They will be wowed by the fact that you know how they take their coffee. And they'll have forgotten that they filled out that sheet for you and gave it to you months ago or years before. But that's a way of organizing it because you find out how do people want it. So if you're like, wow, those two people came in last minute, it was supposed to be their day off. How do I show I appreciate them? You can go into your file that I always had sitting on my desk, pull it out, look for their name. If you put it in alphabetical order, it'll be fast to find them and be like, okay, oh, that's right. Brian this is the way he likes his coffee and he likes gifts. I'm going to go and grab him a coffee. And the boss bringing the staff member a coffee also stands out as a gesture and it's different. So, and they're not going to expect you to bring them coffee every day. They're going to know that this is specifically for this particular reason. If people want a spreadsheet to be able to summarize all of that, they could just pop me an email, sarah@greatnessmagnified.com, because if you have a lot of staff, you may want it to all be summarized. If you have like 5 staff or 10 staff or 20 staff, you probably could use that method, but if you've got 150 people reporting to you, you probably want it in a spreadsheet. And then you could also add up what's the biggest percentage of how people want to be appreciated, and then work with your folks who help you to lead your department, whether it be a support staff member or an assistant manager or a team lead or a lead hand. They can help you with that, because you'll see, like, okay, 90% of people said they want a verbal thank you. We are going to thank at least 5 people every day for the next month. That is our commitment to each other as the leaders and auxiliary staff in this department. That's our mantra, because it's going to make 90% of people happy. So here's a little hack that you can, to hold yourself accountable. Put 5 pennies, or in the case of Canadians, we don't have pennies anymore. Dig them out of a drawer, or like dimes, 5 dimes. They're actually lighter than pennies anyway. 5 dimes in one pocket. And every time you say thank you to somebody, put a dime in the other pocket. And you have to go home at the end of the day with no dimes in the pocket that you started with all the dimes. And if you have to go home early or whatever, things were blowing up, there's always something you can appreciate somebody. But let's say you did get through all your dimes. Guess what? You start with the dimes that you had left over. So if you had 2 left over, you have to have seven thank yous the next day, or 7 thank you cards, or whatever your method that you're going with that particular day. And you will remember, you will be more likely, because you have an accountability mechanism. And if you do that every day for, let's say, a month, you won't need the dimes in the pocket anymore. You will naturally begin to notice, because you've gotten into a recognition habit. In fact, I have a little mini micro course called the recognition habit that the leaders, the essential services leaders who are taking it, that's part of what they're commenting is, I can't believe how easy it was to form a recognition habit. I've been resisting it all this time, thinking I'm too busy, and they're in their busiest time right now. This is a essential services sector that's opening up, and so they're actually busier than they were at the peak of COVID. And they're realizing, wow, it's actually not as much work or as hard as I thought it was. You just, little hacks allows us to organize, and that's the power of organization. Is it allows us to reduce our cognitive bandwidth, because we have a system in place that we no longer have to think about. It just becomes automatic.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, the one thing that you touched on that I had to that I kind of piggybacked after our last talk was understanding how people want to be recognized. So one of the things I started doing recently was Sunday shoutouts, where I pick one of my either coworkers or just one of my peers in the industry, and put a video up on LinkedIn, just recognizing what they do every day. And
I'm glad you do that. Oh, that's so awesome.
But the thing I had to keep in mind was people may not actually want this. So I had to do my homework first and start reaching out to people and say, hey, I'm gonna post this video in about an hour. Are you okay with me talking about you? Right. So yeah, just recognizing that everybody wants to be appreciated in a different way. So yeah, that was a really, really good point that you brought home there.
Well, Brian, what I would suggest for your tool is you can put a shout out, the weekly shout out via LinkedIn. Add that, because there's a field there where you can add something else. Because what I found in doing recognition audits and rebuilds for organizations is that there's always something that is part of the culture, or it's kind of the leader's shtick. Like this is what they do. There's a number of great organizations that I have the privilege of working with over time, and they've developed their own systems that work for them and that are very unique to them. This is a really cool system that you have. So if, let's say, everybody except 2 people in your team are comfortable with that, then you can still film it. You just send it directly to them and say, I recognize that, or I appreciate that you don't want this to be public, but I also don't want to miss the opportunity to show that you are the person I'm giving the shout out to. And then on LinkedIn, you could say, you could still make a point about this. You could say, I want to tell you, without telling you who it is, why I want to recognize somebody. These are the qualities that they have. This is what they did. Now you'll just have to fill in the blank and guess who this person is. And you can almost gamify it. It can become a contest, but you're still respecting that they don't want to be named specifically. So right. you don't have to actually change your system. You just honor the person by tweaking it a little bit. So I love that you're doing that. Tell me what feedback you're getting. Tell me what are folks' reaction, and are you getting any star outcomes from this new strategy that you've started?
Well, essentially, the first person I recognized was a gentleman named Jason Snyder, who's my branch manager.
Mhm.
And just for the everyday stuff that he does, we've went through a lot of challenging times together, working together in the last year. So I just really wanted to appreciate him for that. Kind of some unexpected results. It was very well received. A lot of people had reached out to him. I invited
Oh,
people to connect with him on LinkedIn, and our company actually reshared it from the company page on both LinkedIn and Facebook. So, and it's still getting traction. It's gotten thousands of views at this point, and I'm still getting notifications every day about that. It's been almost 2 weeks now.
that's so cool. I have goosebumps. That is so cool. I'm so glad for you. I'm glad for your company. I'm glad for Jason. I'm glad for every person who's seen a positive post, because that is one of the things that I've heard from folks is that they need more of. They need specific acknowledgement of what's working right now, because it's too easy to go down this negative dark hole of worry and stress for people who are canceling trips because they can't get on airplanes and they're not seeing their family and they're missing out on all their activities that they love. They need to feed their soul with something else. And even if they don't know you or Jason or your company, it's a positive thing in their feed. So there's so many benefits by vicariously experiencing recognition. And I mean, the number of patients who I've been involved in who either had a really positive experience or really negative, they know if rock behaviors are in place. They know if people are being appreciated, if it's organized, if there's good communication, and if people are kind. Because guess who experiences that if there isn't and it aren't those things? The patient. When we look at patient um, safety and all of the movement that has happened, if you drill down to it, I mean, it's much deeper than simply rock. However, there people didn't feel valued and heard and appreciated, therefore they didn't speak up. There was a lack of organization, faulty processes that were broken, and people knew it, and that there were no checklists in place. There was often really terrible communication. That's why we do things like the surgical safety checklist before somebody cuts somebody open. And
Right.
you may be thinking, seriously? We never thought to put an X on a leg before we cut it off? You know why we do now? Because at some point somebody had the wrong leg cut off, or they had an arm cut off when they were there for like a facelift or something?
Right.
So people are human and people do the best that they can, but mistakes happen. So we need to communicate better. And a lot of the communication is not working in healthcare. I mean, how many people are frustrated with team meetings that go nowhere and emails don't get opened and all of those things, right? We can fix these things. And the lack of kindness, the workplace incivility, bullying, discrimination. Your colleague who is so grateful as a fellow employee of color to say, thank you, Brian, for being a role model for me. And I feel connected to you. Do you think that maybe it's because he's experienced discrimination in his life? That wouldn't be a thing for him if it were like, we're colorless here in this organization. My whole life has been colorless. Who cares about color? I know as a woman, I sure as heck have experienced and continue to experience minimization of me as a woman. I constantly have people hitting out on me in LinkedIn, and it minimizes me as a professional. And I hate it. So, we need to have those positive and helpful anchors to make our workplaces safer, to make them places we want to work, and frankly, to keep our best people, to keep our reputations, and for us to be able to keep coming into work when it is tiring, emotionally and mentally tiring to do the work that your listeners do in healthcare.
Absolutely. Kind of a side note here, but I think the most interesting thing for me with the example with Jason was, I let him know I was going to do it, and obviously he wasn't like watching for it or anything. He found out that it was up there because his mom actually called him. She saw the post on LinkedIn before him. So yeah, that was my favorite part of that whole experience.
Oh,
But
that's so great. Oh my God. I just that is so much fun. One of the really interesting things that somebody shared with me that just came to mind, a memory that came to mind when you shared that, was an organization that was going through a massive change, massive. And people were working overtime, they were exhausted, they were burning out. They decided to send dinner home to all the families. And you would think that you had sent them like a chauffeur and took them out caviar champagne for the night. It was something like Swiss chalet. It was very basic, wholesome food. The number of kids and spouses, and if you live with your extended family, the extended family, like the moms, they felt so valued because the organization said in the note that went along with it, we know that by your loved one being here working overtime on this project every single weekend, that we're taking them from you. Just know we're grateful for the sacrifices that your family's making. Take a guess if they were not quite as ornery when their loved one had to keep working on weekends for the next like 2 months, I think it was, for this project. So the moms and dads need to be appreciated and to feel the joy of their people. Like they're, like, look how much work that mom put into raising an awesome Jason. So let's recognize the moms too. I think that that's great. That's so good.
And one thing actually I want to circle back to as well that you mentioned was the importance of having the checklists, or
Mhm.
something to refer back to, and you use that surgical example. I think I can't remember which book it was. I feel like it was Jack Canfield's Success Principles, which I have on the bookshelf here behind me.
Mhm.
But if it wasn't, whatever, it's in one of the books back here.
Yes.
But they use the example of flight, that
Mhm.
the whole flight, the flight crew goes through a checklist every single time, no matter how experienced they are, because of the importance of what they're doing, and you don't want to miss anything. And I think sometimes people minimize the importance of having a checklist. It's something I've definitely seen is helpful. I actually started doing a checklist now when we go to the cottage, because we have my brother-in-law has a cottage that we visit frequently, but we always forget something pretty important and realize, when we're 5 hours away from home.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You forget a toothbrush or something, or just small things. But now we're 5 hours away from home, and that one thing that you really want, you're not getting it until we get back home, right? So there's definitely an importance in that and a value in that. And I just wanted to circle back again to the book. How do we get a copy of the book? How do we get a copy of the audiobook when it's available?
Well, you can go to Goodreads and choose it in the at the bookseller of your choice and in the medium of your choice. Of course, on Amazon. You're welcome to come to my website. If you want a signed copy, you can come to my website, greatnessmagnified.com/store. We'll pop it in the show notes if you're okay with that, Brian, so that
Absolutely.
people have the different options. And who knows, maybe your organization would benefit from everybody having a copy, your hospital. So why not chat with the boss or HR or somebody and say, hey, I think everybody would benefit from being grounded in the same leadership principles in this challenging time. Like, I'll give a bulk discount to all of our healthcare peeps because I want it to, it was designed for everyone to be able to benefit. And anyone in Canada, until the first 1,000 copies are gone, you are welcome to fill it. I'll send you a link, a form, and if you fill out that form, it'll be my gift to you. If it's the States, oh my gosh, the postage is like ridiculous. I would have to sell my children, but and I'm really attached to them, so I'm not going to do that. But anyone in Canada though, I can pop 4 stamps on it and send it to you. So let me know. Just fill out the little form that we'll include in the show notes, and it'll be my gift to you to say thank you for everything that you were doing to get us through COVID. I'm grateful.
Excellent. And what else can we expect from you in the coming months? I know there's been a lot of changes to, speaking schedules in light of COVID-19. But
Mhm.
but what are you working on currently?
Oh, that's a great question. I have received a lot of feedback from my essential services clients, not just in healthcare, but developmental services and um, uh, public health units and children's aid societies, like the whole gamut of people who are just trying very hard to work in a very constrained system, that they need micro learning. And so there's a whole series of micro learning courses. I release one a month. So so July was the recognition habit. We've got communication fundamentals, decision making excellence. Gosh, I'm blanking on one. So there's a number of those micro learning. And again, we can pop those topics in the show notes if you're okay with that. And what it is it's 15 minutes maximum per week. It's almost all video, super short micro content, very practical with downloadable tools, such as checklists. So what I've been receiving in terms of feedback is that it's allowing people to keep developing at a time when conferences aren't happening, and virtual courses are only the thing that's available. However, they're taking too long and people don't get a chance to do them. So over the course of a month, there's 15 minutes a week, or if you want to do it all in one shot, you could take no more than an hour. And it gives people the tools and the resources and the anchors of key leadership fundamentals that are, people are needing right now, but they need all the time. So that's what I'm working on every month. And I have some of my essential services clients where at the beginning of the month, I send it to their entire leadership staff because they want to learn together. And this is the only forum they're going to be able to learn together. And then the other thing that may be happening is that I've already had somebody reach out this week to want to do a version for other industries. So, maybe security services will be next. I don't know. Maybe we're going to need to work together on this, Brian. So she's in the hazardous materials industry. So she would like to have Rockstar magnifying your greatness in times of change for the hazardous industries. Really cool person out of Australia. So you never know. There may be a number of versions for different industries coming out of this. And it's designed purposely with that intention that let's love up our key audience here. Let's love up our healthcare people, particularly folks in hospitals. And then we can always tweak the content, keep the structure the same, because everybody needs recognition, organization, communication, kindness, and everybody wants satisfaction, teamwork, achievement, and retention. However, the stories and the tools and the resources may be a little different based on industry. So I think you can anticipate that there's going to be different iterations of this book based on meeting different industry needs. It's just a question of who kind of reaches out and says, okay, our industry's next. Let's evolve this guide and resource to them. So that's what's next. What about you, Brian? What do you have coming up? What's next for you?
Just continued growth of the podcast. It's been well received, so very happy about that. As far as any other developments, like I'm always working on a lot of things in the background, so I don't want to I don't want to give up too much there, but just expect to see some different things from the Healthcare Security Cast. Moving forward, there's lots happening behind the scenes.
Cool. And a shout out to you and all of your resilient board members for all the work that you've had to do to pivot your conference. Uncertain times. Yeah, it's not easy. I know from working in this industry where most of what I do is as a speaker, I know how much work it is to plan a conference and then have to pivot it, delay it, reschedule things. That's tons of work. So just please pass on my appreciation to your association for how resilient you've all been. And, if I can send a video message of appreciation to your folks, don't hesitate to let me know, because it's not easy right now, and personally and professionally for folks. And thank you to all of your board members for volunteering, for one thing, and then also for committing to finding a way to have a really powerful conference next year that people will be just so hungry for. By the time you reach it, they'll have a year off and they'll be like, we need our people. I need to see all of you again. We need to talk best practices together.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure everybody would be delighted to get a video. So let's make that happen.
We'll make it happen for sure. Mm-hmm.
All right. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't bring up to this point?
Just for me to say thank you to all of the people who are listening for your commitment to your leadership, that you've stayed to the end of this podcast. And please forward this to the people that you know. If you feel the message is relevant outside of your sector, then by all means forward it on to your peers and your colleagues. Also, of course, to your peers and your colleagues in this industry, because I think together as the leadership peer group, the more we can have the same foundation and be supporting each other, the less these things feel like anomalies or that we're black sheep in the organization. So share this podcast, share this episode with people. And if you know folks in the security industry who aren't listening to this podcast, forward this or whatever podcast has been most helpful for you to encourage more people to be developing themselves through listening and leadership lessons in this really accessible format. We're lucky, Brian, that you have this vehicle for people. And so, yeah, I encourage you to share this with people that may not have caught the episode. And don't assume that somebody has tuned in just because they subscribe to it, because it may be an off week for them or a vacation, or just make sure that they don't miss whatever episode in this podcast series that they would benefit from, or an episode that you listen to now that let's say in 6 months from now, you think, I think I listened to that on Brian's podcast. Which one was it? Go back and find it and forward it to them and just say, hey, I got you, man. I got you, sister. Like, we're in this together. Here's a resource I think that would be helpful, that will normalize your experience, and use this wonderful resource that's available to you by sharing it.
Excellent. And just as we wrap up, what are the best ways to get in touch with you? How do we connect with you?
Yeah, my website, greatnessmagnified.com, is probably the easiest way. There's a contact form on there, or you can email me personally, Sarah with an H at greatnessmagnified.com. And I'm on all over social media except TikTok. That would embarrass my children way too much. But Instagram. My last name is spelled McVanel. So I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Gosh, insert all non-tween forms of social media. I'm there. Please connect with me. Let me know if I can help you, serve you, support you, send you any of those tools we talked about. I'm here for you, and I'm grateful for what you're doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
That concludes another episode of the Healthcare Security Cast. Again, I'll remind everybody to connect with me on social media. I'm on all the major platforms, including TikTok, embarrassing my children. So definitely feel free to connect with me on there. I'm the only Brian, Brine, on any of these platforms. And also there's links to all those platforms on my website, brianhamilton.com. Thank you. Join us again next time when we have a new guest and a new topic. Until then, stay safe and take care.